Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Jeremy Smith. The winter chill is closing in, so let's wrap up nice and warm with another drop of French football. But before we dive into a deep week, here are the latest headlines. Saint-Etienne kicked things off on Friday night with their second half heroics, earning them a 3-0 win over Nantes. Robert Beric, Wabi Kazri, and Timothy Kolodziak earned Les Verts a win that keeps them in the hunt for Europe. On Saturday, Lille halted their recent slide with a 2-2 draw against Lyon. Loic Remy grabbed the first goal for the club as the host went 2 goals to the good, only for Legon to fight back for the point. In the multiplex, Monaco's revival was short-lived as Montpellier earned a 2-1 win at the Stade Louis II, as Nîmes made it 3 wins on the bounce in all competitions, as Rachid Aloi's double helped them to a 3-0 victory over Amiens. Angers and Caen could not be separated in the other fixtures that evening with a 1-1 draw, while Guingamp claimed another unlikely point at home to high-flying Nice in their game that ended 0-0. On Sunday, Toulouse came back from 2 goals down and a goalkeeper down as well to draw 2-2 with Dijon, while Reims put on a defensive masterclass as they earned a goalless draw against Marseille. Strasbourg are into the top half after a strong 4-1 win over Rennes, who, despite going ahead, gave away 2 penalties as they slipped further away from the European places. In the final match of the weekend, on the 15th time of asking, someone has taken points off Paris Saint-Germain. Andreas Cornelius grabbed an equaliser with time running out for Bordeaux to get a 2-2 draw off the almost perfect leaders. In other news, Luka Modric has won the Ballon d'Or this evening, hosted by France Football, with Frenchman Antoine Griezmann finishing 3rd and fellow compatriot Kylian Mbappe finishing 4th. And France have drawn an interesting group for the Euro 2020 qualifying stages. They will be facing off against Iceland, Turkey, Albania, Moldova, and Andorra. The first matches will be played on the 22nd of March, and they will be hoping to finish in the top 2 who get automatic qualification to the final tournament. And that's all for now, but to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with that news from just before we started, in fact, with the Ballon d'Or, as Luka Modric is the winner of France Football's award. And, individual awards are always a difficult thing to chat about, really. Jez, he's finally broken the Messi-Ronaldo monopoly. Do you think he was the right man to be the one to do that?
Absolutely not. In my opinion, obviously I'm going to be biased, but I mean, first of all, let's say that there's been lots of stuff on Twitter this evening saying how ridiculous it is that Messi's only 5th in the world, even though he's the best player in the world. I understand that, but I think for quite a long time now, the Ballon d'Or has clearly been more a reflection or an award based on sort of rewarding people for what they've achieved in that preceding calendar year. And although Messi has for the most part carried Barcelona and certainly carried them to a Spanish title, I think because it's a World Cup year and because Argentina disappointed, it's understandable that he missed out. But seeing as it's based on rewarding what players have achieved during that year, for me, it's the wrong decision. Modric, he's won the Champions League and he's helped his team to the World Cup. But I just felt that during the World Cup there was some kind of weird groundswell of this Modric love, which I'm not saying he's not a great player. Of course he is, but I think he's been consistently very good for years without necessarily really meriting. It's not the same as, for example, when players like Xavi and Iniesta missed out. I don't think he's quite at their level. And certainly, if it's based on the calendar year, by all accounts, since the start of the new season, he's been pretty poor overall. So for me, you've got Varane, who also won the Champions League, but also won the World Cup, and I think was consistently the best player across the World Cup. Okay, he's a defender, and they're always going to be marked down for some stupid reason, but not marked, don't get the recognition of others. But to me, 7th place for him is a joke. And then the other two are obviously Griezmann and Mbappe, and probably what happens is that they sort of diluted each other's votes down. I wouldn't be surprised if people were sort of split between them, and if it had just been one of them, they may well have won it. But for me, Griezmann, I've said before, I think he wouldn't say carried, but he was one of the star men as Atletico won the Europa League. He scored 2 goals and was man of the match in the final. In the World Cup, he had a disappointing group stage, but I thought he was absolutely immense and basically set the whole tone for how France played in the knockout stages, and sort of finished that off with, well, I thought he was absolutely amazing against Belgium, but in the final as well, for me, he was the man of the match. He set up a couple, he scored one. And again, just he was the one who controlled France. They sort of played to his bidding, I think. And while so far this season hasn't been quite as stellar, I still think that he's kept up high standards. Certainly in the Champions League, I think he's got 4 goals already in the group stages, which is a very good record as well. So I think, I don't know what else he can do to win it. And this is probably his last chance, I'd have thought. Mbappe will certainly have other chances. I know, a lot of people thought that he deserved it. Personally, I don't think he did. I think his first 6 months for PSG, I don't think were particularly amazing. Obviously, by any other sort of 19-year-old standards, they were. But because of the standards he set himself, I don't think he was playing fantastically for the first 6 months. He had a brilliant World Cup, but I would say not as good as Varane and Griezmann. And certainly the second half of the year, though, he's been fantastic. And if he'd had those kinds of standards the first half of the year, I'd say probably he'd be an indisputable candidate for the Ballon d'Or. It wouldn't have been an injustice if he'd won it. For me, I don't think he should have done, but I do think it's an injustice that either Griezmann or Varane didn't. I don't think Modric should be up there. I certainly don't think Ronaldo should be up there. And as we say every year when the UNFP awards come out as well, I think maybe a lot of the voters are being a little bit lazy and unimaginative, unfortunately.
It's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the Ballon d'Or or the world player or the best player, whatever they want to call all these trophies nowadays, but it feels a little bit more like a token gesture, doesn't it? I mean, it's almost like a nod, like you said, to the Xavis and the Iniestas of the world that missed out because of the pure dominance that Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo had for the longest time, really. And even in the World Cup, really, he was good, but he was never really top quality. But at the same time, you can really throw a blanket over almost every player in the World Cup, really. I don't think there was anyone who really stood head and shoulders above anyone, really. But when you think that he won the Champions League and bits like that, I think they've almost done it as a token gesture, not to those players. It also feels a little bit like the other thing that a lot of people point to, the sort of Ryan Giggs Sports Personality of the Year award, where it was almost like a terms of service deserving. Like, you've been so mildly underrated for so long. Here's an award to just prove a little bit of something and give you an edge. That's not to say that Modric obviously isn't a fantastic footballer on his day. He's probably had a really poor second half of 2018. Really, he's not been great in a Real Madrid side that's really struggled, and he struggled personally as well, not just for Real Madrid either, even for Croatia as well, as they've dropped out and got relegated in the Nations League as well. So it just feels a bit token, and I always feel like it's a shame when a team's won a World Cup and plenty of those players have had success as well, that and good years as well, that none of them are rewarded in a year that eventually they the grip from the two titans is loosened, and it's very much like many were a little bit disappointed after the World Cup in 2010, in 2014, that none of those players that succeeded so well didn't get the sort of recognition again. I mean, no German player was even close on the 2014 one. There was a time where many thought Ribéry maybe should have stolen it as well. It just feels like a shame that it's this sort of almost half gesture at the fact that someone else should finally win it, and it ends up being a relatively underwhelming one. But a positive we'll finish on, at least on the Ballon d'Or talk, because Kylian Mbappe won the Young Award this evening as well, which comes as no surprise to anyone. I don't think anyone quite comes close in that category, really, if we're being absolutely honest, Jez. But he's going to be someone, thankfully, that's going to be the sort of, you can't imagine him not winning a Ballon d'Or sometime, even in the near future.
He certainly should do if he carries on his sort of I don't know if learning curve is the right word. It's it's more than a curve, but he sort of 2016 just hit the ground running, sprinting, and like I said, I think there was a bit of a drop off for a lot of last season, but what he's done at the World Cup and since just shows what a talent he is. And as he gets older and stronger and more experienced, as long as he doesn't get distracted by some of the sort of extracurricular activities or distractions of footballers, and stays fit and healthy. It's a cliche, but the world really is his oyster. I mean, he could be an absolute megastar. It's almost like you worry for him that he's sort of achieving a little bit too much too young, but hopefully that will be a springboard for him to go on to even better things, rather than him sort of, it's not the same as Wayne Rooney, but Rooney sort of burst onto the scene in Euro, what was it, 2004, and sort of with hindsight, you could argue that was his peak, certainly internationally. It's possible that, I hope not, but it's possible we've already seen the peak of Mbappe. But if we have, it's not a bad peak to achieve a World Cup at 19. But certainly he should be looking to go down in history as one of the greatest ever. There's no reason why he can't do.
Absolutely, and the other factors that come into it as well. You really hope that he doesn't get an injury or anything like that curtails his magnificent pace. Really, that would be such a shame, and something we've seen happen to plenty of great players. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Yeah, good.
Hopefully, he's intelligent and talented enough of a footballer that even if he were to lose some of his pace, there's still enough there. He's not like a Walcott who's got just pace and absolutely nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a major difference between the two, isn't it? But let's hope he can stay fit and stay firing, and continue on to do some great things for Paris Saint-Germain and for France, who obviously the draw in Dublin happened the other night to get it for the Euro 2020 qualifying groups. So the teams in France get what is, I suppose the draws can be a little bit awkward everywhere now, but it's not too bad of a draw, really, you could say. But Iceland, recent qualifiers, but have sort of dropped off. Their Nations League and their World Cup weren't as idyllic as it has been, and Turkey are sort of in a bad moment as well, a side that we'd usually think is maybe a little bit of an awkward one at times, especially away from home. But they've really struggled on the international scene in the last couple of years as well, despite having some really interesting players. In fairness to the other three, Albania can be an awkward away trip, but you expect really walkovers against Moldova and Andorra, but nothing less than top of this group, really. And looking at all the other groups that they could have got, like the Netherlands group, really. But in all honesty, this should be a walkover for Deschamps' side, shouldn't it?
It certainly should be. France have a history of never making it quite that easy for themselves, and you can look at a few of the teams there and sort of make an argument for why it's not going to be entirely straightforward. Turkey, as you said, they're sort of not at the peak of their powers, but it's never an easy place to go. And With all due respect to France, maybe it's a bit harsh for the football team right now, but certainly French sports people in general are not always the strongest sort of mentally, and you could imagine that some would be a little bit affected by a really intimidating atmosphere. Andorra, even when they were very new on the scene, and I think they've improved a lot since then. I think it was even in qualifying for Euro 2000 with France as world champions. They really struggled past them a couple of times. And one of them, I think it took a very late penalty from Leboeuf to even win the match. So there's history there for a bit of shakiness. Same with Iceland, obviously, that on paper it looked like they came out quite comfortably in the Euro 2016 quarter final, but Iceland even there gave them a little bit to think about. And then even earlier this year, it was a friendly, but Iceland for the most part outplayed France, and France were a little bit lucky to come away with a 2-2 draw. So, and then Moldova, it's never easy to go to I know it's cliche, but it's never easy to go to these relatively far-flung places where you don't have the same sort of creature comforts of quality sort of changing rooms or anything like that to play in. So I don't think, and Albania as well, going back again to Euro 2016, I was there actually, but it took a couple of very, very late goals for France to squeeze past them. So, and I think they lose to Albania in a I think it was a friendly, one of those late season friendlies.
Before the Euros, maybe?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a qualifier or it was definitely in sort of one of those June ones where you wonder how many people still care, how many are still on holiday. But I'm pretty sure there was a defeat there. But yeah, it might have been a qualifier even. So certainly France should not be taking any of these matches or these teams lightly. But it would be a massive, massive shock if they weren't to qualify.
I don't think they should be really having any trouble, really. I mean, even Iceland have dropped off to a certain extent from 6 months. I know they went on a great run, but they weren't great at all in the Nations League competitively, and you feel like it maybe was one of those moments. And if anything, this is a group where Turkey are looking at it to think that maybe they can steal a moment in the tournament away from Iceland. There's not exactly competition elsewhere, so the games against them will be absolutely massive. But yeah, I can't imagine Deschamps not looking at this group and thinking that if anything, they should be taking maximum points and qualifying as soon as possible to give them some time to experiment a little bit. I mean, like we said, there's some groups that are a little bit more awkward, at least anyway. You wouldn't have really fancied to go into that the group with Netherlands and Germany and even Belarus on a high from winning their group. Northern Ireland are a tricky team. That's such a tricky, awkward group. And the same with Portugal's Ukraine and Serbia both had great Nation League times. They're both sides rising as well at the moment. That's not an easy one necessarily. So in a way, they probably feel like they've got off a little bit lightly for some of the things, but at the same time, you might say European qualifying full stop can be a little bit light for most teams that have the strength and depth to get to tournaments at least anyway. But let's move on now back to Liga action, and it was a great weekend full of interesting results, and we can't start anywhere else but that game on Sunday night where Paris Saint-Germain finally dropped some points, and there's still some talking points around that as well. But Cardiff legend Andreas Cornelius grabbing the header that grabs the headlines, that gives Les Girondins a good draw, and out of sort of slowly they've been up and down this season, really, Jez, but a great point for them to get off the back of a good win in the Europa League as well that keeps their hopes alive there too. Was Bordeaux always maybe one of the teams that you felt like in this game heading into it that maybe this is finally the team that might cause some trouble for Paris Saint-Germain and finally take something off them?
Yeah, I think it's sort of easy to say it with hindsight, but they are one of those teams that on their day, they don't always have many days, but they are up and down there. But they are a talented bunch, and they do have some kind of pride there. They are sort of a team a club with a very rich history, and so I think there is an element of, when they're playing one of the other bigger teams, they do tend to raise their game. I think Lyon have certainly come unstuck against them a couple of times in recent seasons. And as you said, I think that if you look at the Europa League, say Bordeaux and Rennes, I mean, they're both still in with a shout of qualifying. Bordeaux a little less than Rennes, but I think both of them have possibly the results they've had haven't necessarily been an entirely fair reflection of how they've been playing in the Europa League. And you look at Bordeaux's goal difference actually isn't so bad, considering that they are struggling to qualify, and I think it shows that they have been tough to beat. So I don't think it's a massive shock, but at the same time, they are 11th, so sort of banging in mid-table, and it wouldn't necessarily have been the match that you'd have expected PSG to come unstuck. There's some others that they've played already, which maybe looked a little bit harder on paper, but coming off that Liverpool win, there's no doubt which of the two matches would have been more important to win this week. So I think possibly there was a bit of a mental drop-off was to be expected, but yeah, 2-1 ahead with not long to go, you certainly would have expected PSG to go through, and maybe it was the fact that Neymar had gone off injured and Mbappe seemed to want to go off after he'd scored. Possibly there are just a few players there who are a little bit mentally and physically tired, and at some point they were going to have to drop points. At times you did start to wonder, let alone going through a season unbeaten, are they actually going to go through a season winning every single match? But it takes an extraordinary feat to do that, however good the players they've got compared to the players they're facing week in, week out in Ligue 1. It's a little bit too much to ask, and at some point this is bound to happen. And it's not such a shock that it's at Bordeaux of all places.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're in a good moment as well, aren't they? Like we said, from the good Europa League result as well, that keeps those flames alive a little bit, and they've been up and down, but a little bit better in the league recently, at least. And yeah, PSG just seem to drop it a little bit in moments, but at the same time, it's not like we've not seen this coming at points, really. I mean, earlier on this season, they were a little bit lucky at Guingamp and at Nîmes at times. They sort of allowed themselves to get casually into a game of it, and then sort of strode away in the last sort of couple of minutes or so, or in the second half, sort of pulled away with the quality that they have. But it doesn't always allow you to do that. And then this one, when they were a little bit lackadaisical after the 1-0, they were sort of brought back to life, and eventually Bordeaux managed to grab the goal that, in essence, really, that I felt like they deserved. I don't think they were necessarily completely outclassed by Paris Saint-Germain, as other sides have been this season. But like you say, attentions were also distracted from that midweek game. There was plenty of energy spent in that one because it mattered a lot more to them. But what might matter a lot more to them, just depending on how he sort of recovers, because we don't quite know the extent of it yet. But as Neymar, like you mentioned, had to hobble off of things, it seems like Mbappe was maybe a little bit of cramp and will be okay. But the Brazilian is a little bit more fearful that he might be out for a few games at least, which is a little bit of a worry with that the Red Star game still coming around the corner. While you still expect them to win, you don't really want to be losing one of your best players at this time, really. But at the same time, at least it's not the knockout stage of the Champions League if they get there with him out. But he's still going to be a bit of a miss, because especially in that Liverpool game, he was really, really spectacular, and he did have a good goal in this one, and he's an important player.
I'm going to probably get criticised by PSG fans for saying it again, but I mean, I thought he was excellent against Liverpool as he was in the first half in the second match against Napoli. And it's good that he's starting to show signs that he is turning up for good matches in a way that he hadn't done yet certainly since the time that he was at Barcelona. I would still be inclined to suggest that away to Red Star is the kind of match that you could see him not particularly fancying. And so if he was going to miss any match, as you said, I think certainly not knockouts and arguably better that you missed that one than at home to Liverpool, where I think all the ingredients are there for him to feel like, yeah, this is the kind of match where I really want to turn on the style. I think away to Red Star, maybe you want a little bit more sort of not dogs of war, but players who are going to show a little bit more fight than Neymar tends to do sometimes. So, he's obviously, well, I was going to say one of the best players in the world. I think he's officially number 11th or 12th best player in the world according to tonight's rankings. But you always would rather have someone like that in your team than not. But I think there could be worse times for him to miss out. So I still think if PSG show the same heart and desire that they did against Liverpool, they should still be able to come out on top even without him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird, isn't it? He's a big miss, but also not a big miss at the same time. It's strange when you have so much strength and depth that you can kind of accept the loss of a player of Neymar's quality. I mean, there's probably about millions of teams in the entire world globe that would absolutely die a death without a player like that. But Paris Saint-Germain are maybe the one of maybe 3-4 clubs that could maybe live without a player of his dynamic abilities, at least for a couple of games at least.
I still think that maybe just having 2 of those 3 could work in some ways to PSG's benefit as well, because I don't think anyone can argue anymore that there's absolutely no doubt that Cavani is the sort of mistreated of the 3. Whatever Tuchel says to the contrary, the fact that it's always him that goes off first, I think even maybe.
Yeah.
Certainly against Liverpool, he went off early. And that was just after Mbappe wasted a break when Cavani was well played by basically stopping the break in its tracks to wait for Neymar to catch up with him. So I think without Neymar there, possibly Mbappe and Cavani there's no reason why they couldn't form a very good partnership. I just think that they're not sort of been given the chance to by whatever politics is going on. I think it was Nick Miller who sent a tweet just after that break collapsed saying one day someone will write a PhD on the politics of PSG's counterattacks, which I thought was quite a pointed but funny tweet. And it would be nice to see Mbappe and Cavani being given a chance together without Neymar getting in the way.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it fits in, and then how the dynamic changes when he comes back again, similar to last year. Let's see how it affects under different management styles. But they're pretty blessed, to be fair. Let's put it that way. They're not exactly rooting for it. But we move on really to a team that's not so riches, and their demise maybe wasn't so greatly exaggerated, really, in Monaco, who fell apart again at the weekend against Montpellier. It's maybe the best way to describe it, because 2 late goals from Le Payard, who have been great this season, but at the same time, Monaco will be really disappointed that they did have quite a decent performance, really, Jez. They weren't too bad. They had a couple of good opportunities. They grabbed a goal. They were comfortable for the first half, you would say, but again, defensively, they just let things slip. They couldn't kill the game off offensively either. So it just ended up with them losing again and losing ground already again. They're now 3 points adrift of the teams above them now. It's getting a little bit silly now. We thought they may have turned a corner with that result last week. We thought they may have turned a corner with an okay performance against us, and I felt like a Madrid side that should give them promise, but they let things slip again.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that they will be relieved at is that probably that Dijon wasted a 2-goal and man advantage at Toulouse, so it keeps them a little bit more in touch. And Monaco actually have got a goal difference than the 2 ahead of them, so that's something for them to sort of look on the bright side of. But I felt really sorry for them at the weekend. I think they for the most part this season, they have been awful, as bad as their results have suggested, and haven't deserved anything from it. But first half against Montpellier, I actually thought they were excellent. They looked really organised in defence, had a 5-man defence. Pierre Gabriel looked great on the right of the centre, I think, and they look relatively comfortable. And for the first time, I think, the first time I've seen it at Monaco, Tielemans really was running the show. I thought he looked the class in midfielder that Monaco thought that they'd signed. He scored a lovely goal, sort of dictating a counter attack and just kind of breaking stride just that sort of split second to buy some space off the defender to put the ball away. And I thought he absolutely deserved the goal, and Monaco deserved the lead. But I think it was just nerves because of what's been happening that they just fell further and further back as the second half went on. And I suppose it was inevitable that Montpellier were going to equalise, but then to lose the match so late after a huge defensive error from Jemison as well, it was really cool, and it was the first time that I really thought, this is bad. Things aren't going their way, and if even when they're playing well, things are going to go against them, then they really could be in trouble. I still think they should have enough about them, and I still think that they've got a reasonable run till Christmas, apart from the Lyon match where they could get points, but every time they don't, then the next match becomes bigger and bigger. I think I haven't double checked, but have they got Amiens next, which is the team just above them? So having played Caen a couple of weeks ago, this is another absolutely massive match. Not only giving them a chance to catch up, obviously, if Amiens get 3 points, then they're suddenly 6 points ahead of them, and they're in even deeper trouble.
And like you say, you look at their fixture list. Really, it is Amiens next week away from home. They need a result there really to pull them back into the mire and start getting them some traction. A derby should convince them. The weekend, surely they can get up against Nice, but that's not an easy game when they're difficult to score against as well. Then an away game to Lyon, that's exactly what they don't want to be having at this time of the year. And then they finish off before the winter break facing the bottom side. They need to get results. They need to start getting results, because that's what will breed the confidence. Because even going into January, they start off against Marseille at the Velodrome as well, when they come back off their winter jollies as well. So something needs to start giving for them. It just feels like when luck's not going your way as well, it does start to really worry you, to be honest. I mean, you feel like this is a much better team than we seem to be getting on the field all the time. And they do put in these performances that aren't that bad. But when you're losing games and you're not that bad, it starts to put the alarm bells on really more than anything. And you start thinking, well, if you're playing okay at the moment and you can't really get out of third gear, where are these results going to start coming from? I mean, they need to start doing it now, or otherwise they're going to be in real trouble. And maybe Thierry Henry, if they have a really poor December, maybe his name will come up again, and his seat will start to heat up a little bit. Because Jez, like you say, if it doesn't change, it kind of has to, doesn't it?
Well, the one thing that I keep thinking back to is that, obviously from slightly closer to it than others, but Metz were horrific last year and were bottom basically the whole season, at times sort of 10, 12 points adrift from the rest. And they only actually got relegated, I think, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the season. So it kind of just, it's a silly thing to say, but it sort of drills home how long the season is, how many points there are on offer, and how quickly things can change. I remember that they had a good run just after Christmas, and suddenly they were only sort of 3-6 points adrift from the rest, and then they sort of collapsed again. But Monaco are in a much better. I know this is not. I'm sure none of this is much consolation to Monaco fans right now, but they are in a better position than Metz, and they've got a hell of a lot more about them to get out of trouble than Metz. So I don't think it's panic stations yet, but it's certainly worry stations. The one thing I would say is that you look at the team, and in theory, Falcao was supported by a World Cup semi-finalist and World Cup quarter-finalist in Chadli and Golovin. They were, Golovin in particular, absolute tripe. I've never really seen them fuss in Golovin anyway, but it's a bit harsh just because he had a decent shot that hit the bar, and if that had gone in, it would have been 2-0 and they probably would have gone on to win the match. But apart from that shot, I thought he looked like a League One footballer for most of the match. Absolute rubbish. And if I was Henry, I'd drop him from the team as soon as possible if they want to look to score goals.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about some of these young players as well. I think at least some of them that they've been starting, they just aren't ready. I don't think. I think some of them quite clearly maybe need another year in the oven. But it's just how he balances that on. I mean, it's kind of how the team's been built now, really, and injuries have obviously forced his hand as well. But they do need to sort of dip into the coffers. But then your worries that the ownership's maybe not as involved as previously. Is there other money coming in? All those sort of questions start swirling, and then you do really start to fear for them. But you do feel like something needs to click into gear in this next month, and it will be crucial for players, for the club, and for management for that to happen for them. Onto the big game, really, or the bigger game of the weekend, really, between Lille and Lyon. Two sides fighting for Champions League football, but contrasting sort of fortunes in the last couple of weeks, at least. Anyway, Lyon have been pretty good for the last few weeks or so, and been taking some good results even in the Champions League. Lille dipped a little bit here, and they'll be massively disappointed, won't they, really, Jez, that they got 2 goals up. I know Loic Remmers was very early, but they got into a strong position, and much like Lyon have all season, really, they've just managed to sneak something when you thought that maybe they were having a bit of an off day, and at the same time it would have been a great another statement for Lille, but for Lyon now that's a point that gets them ever closer to PSG, even though Montpellier picked up a win that throws them into second. It means that Lyon maybe have sort of attested their previous sort of amnesty against some of the bigger teams this season, or some of the against some of these games where they felt like they should have got wins. But this is finally one where maybe they felt like they probably should have lost it, but then they've come away with a point that they'll be more than happy with.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt Lyon will be happy of the two. I think they'd have taken the draw before the match, and certainly at 2-0 down, they'd have been very happy with that. And it keeps them up there. It helps that Marseille didn't manage to get a win against Reims, so it's sort of it doesn't put them any further back, having played one of their rivals at the top. For Lille, it's very frustrating. That's quite a few matches now without a win, and I'm not saying that they've got any reason to panic yet, but certainly at 2-0 up, they'd have been thinking this was the time for their recent luck form to change, and they'd have been good for it. But they played very well. They scored a couple of lovely goals, and they were. I thought for the most part the better team, but Genesio gets a hell of a lot of stick, and sometimes Lyon put themselves in silly positions. But this is a kind of microcosm of it that they fell behind by not playing very well. But at least they did show some kind of mental resolve to get back into it, and in the same way that PSG came off a big result to only draw it in the domestic league. I think you have to say the same for Lyon. A hard-fought match against City that they were unlucky not to win, and straight off that, visiting somewhere like Lille was not a very easy match to go to, and so to come away from that with a draw, I think is a good result for them. So certainly Lille will be kicking themselves more, but overall, as a neutral, I think you have to say it was a great advert for Ligue, and 2 very good matches, a few very good goals, and two quality teams who deserve to be sort of fighting for European places.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been 2 entertaining teams, at least anyway, with great forward play, at least anyway, and they showed that at times in this one. I thought both teams showed a lot of endeavour and a lot of reasons why they are sort of in that top end of the league, but also why they're so far off Paris Saint-Germain at the same time. Both of them have great attacking intent with players that can burst forward and create chances and score goals. Even like Remy finally getting on the act for Lille with the young bucks as well will be great to see. It's a great player to learn from the experiences that he's got both in France and in England. And then Lyon showing some character to come back as well, grab a win, because a lot of times they've allowed things to slip this season, and getting Moussa Dembele getting more goals as well. It's good to see him start to grow into the team a little bit. He can sometimes look a little bit overeager. He can sometimes sort of lose the ball a little bit, but they're slowly integrating him in. He's not always starting either, but it's great to see him get another goal and get some more confidence and start to claw back some of these results and claw back some of the giant fee they paid for him. We're almost finished tonight. There will be an extra dosage of Liga in midweek, which will be great for us Liga fans to enjoy at least anyway. But just before we go tonight, let's do our Liga and snapshot. So what haven't we discussed tonight that our fans at home should hear about?
I'm going to have to make this up on the spot because I forget about this every week, and usually you save me by asking someone else first and giving me a chance to come up with something.
I can go first if you wish.
Yeah, go on then.
I have one. I absolutely have one in hand. Of course I do. I always do. Mine goes to the great result of the weekend for Reims, but specifically Edouard Mendy, who was absolutely terrific in goal for the Champagne club. He made a string of saves against a Marseille side that tried to kind of batter down the door, really. 6 shots on target, really, but 15 shots. But he was commanding. He was a great shot stopper. He distributed well. He marshalled his defence terrifically. And in fact, at times, Reims maybe could have nicked it even. There was a couple of chances for them to grab a little bit of a win, and they would have only had one person to thank, really, and that's Edouard Mendy, who's had, I think, a really underrated season. He's been terrific so far for Reims. A big reason why they have been so good defensively. It's not just the centre-backs in the organisation. It's been him being the brick wall at the end of the road as well for everyone to try and smash past. And kudos to him, kudos to management, kudos to Reims for an excellent result that I'm sure not many would have thought they would have got at the Velodrome, and they should be immensely proud of how they've started this season. And one of the reasons why has been him and the amount of clean sheets he's kept for the newly promoted side. So, Jez, I've given you a little bit of time.
All right.
What's your Liga snapshot?
If I may, it's not going to be a Liga snapshot exactly, but I'm going to cheat and go back to what we started with and mention the now infamous incident that happened tonight during the Ballon d'Or ceremony, which is kind of Liga connected, or more Division 1 connected, because it relates to Lyon women's team. This is Ada Hegerberg, who quite rightly won the inaugural women's Ballon d'Or for everything that she's achieved, obviously, with Lyon, won the Champions League yet again. Martin Solveig, who was co-presenting, sort of started off very well by saying, inaugural Ballon d'Or winner, and it's about time that there was a women's Ballon d'Or trophy, and then ruined all his good work by asking the winner if she can twerk, which, as people noted, he didn't ask Modric whether he could do. Quite rightly, Hegerberg sort of dismissed it with just the right level of disdain and walked off. And yeah, it was not a pretty moment, and has got a hell of a lot of coverage, quite rightly, on Twitter. It shows that, I guess, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's great, and certainly I think Lyon particularly leading the way in putting women's football on the map. And it's absolutely right that there is now a women's Ballon d'Or trophy, but it also shows that there's still a few hurdles to be jumped over before it gets entirely it and its players get entirely the respect that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple more hurdles to jump. He should absolutely ask Modric to twerk next time if he comes back on, because that's in the rightness of equality. He should have absolutely asked the young Croatian to do it as well. But
I bet Griezmann and Mbappe can twerk better than him as well.
I think Griezmann would have done it, but without him asking. To be fair, more than anything,
Probably not.
yeah, I don't think he would have needed any invitation to do it. But I think that's a perfect place to stop this week. My thanks to Jez and all of you listening at home. Do join us for it'll be another version of our show on Thursday, because we do have another midweek round of fixtures, some great ones to tune into. So if you've got BT Sport in the UK, do tune in, because there's plenty of games on tomorrow and Wednesday night as well. So do tune in, because there's some crackers coming to your screen. And we'll join you here again on Thursday. A bientôt and goodbye.